Good morning, Warzone kids. It's chilly this morning. It's 18 degrees on the Vermont section of the trail to the Western Lands. And I think it's going to get colder throughout the day. That's what the weather forecast says. And then by about this time tomorrow morning, it's meant to be about negative 18, which even by Vermont standards is straight up cold. But that ain't what it's like now. Now it's 18 degrees, and that's about normal for this time in January. And I'm glad you're watching if you're a Warzone kid. That's my term for those of us like myself. I'm a child sex abuse survivor. As an adult, I live with borderline personality disorder. I'm a recovering addict and bulimic. A Warzone kid is my term for those of us that grew up with in an environment that was more like a war zone. In my case, like a low-grade guerrilla war, than it was a supportive nursery. And I think of our soul, our psyche, our self, as like a Jenga tower. You know that game where you start off with one big block that's made out of a lot of small blocks, and with every turn you take out a small block, put it on top. By the end of the game, that tower is leaning, it's unsteady, it's rickety, and the game ends when the tower falls down. But for us Warzone kids, when we reach adulthood, it's like our Jenga tower is already just about at the end of the game. It's rickety, it's fallen over, and in fact, I'll tell you what, I think this is probably true. As a general rule, for us Warzone kids, we don't start the trail to the Western Lands until our Jenga tower falls over. The Western Lands is what I think of as the land of peace and wholeness, where we learn and become what we are. And the trail to the Western Lands is like a pilgrimage of life where we're headed toward learning and becoming what we are and a place of peace and wholeness. That's just how I think about it. Because the pilgrimage is headed to a destination, sure, but the pilgrimage itself is an act of devotion. And so I think of life as an act of devotion to life itself, to my life as a Warzone kid in the here and now. None of the bad things that happened to me in my childhood are happening to me now. All that's happening to me right now is I'm driving on a beautiful snowy morning and I'm talking to you. And I love it. And if you like this and my other stuff, head over to my channel on YouTube and TikTok at Trail to the Western Lands and subscribe. I'd like you to join the trail. I like company. But I was thinking about yesterday, and I'm sorry, I just can't repeat the whole thing or this video will be 30 minutes long. But I think this will stand on its own, but it also fits into what I was talking about yesterday. I was talking about the Canyon of the Furies and Magar's Stronghold. That's from Game of Thrones. I like the show. Most of it. So if you want to hear more, if you want to hear that full story, go watch my video from yesterday. But the idea, I'm a recovering addict and bulimic, and the idea of demons. If you're a Warzone kid, I bet you my bottom dollar you can relate to the idea of demons. Demons are furies. Furies are creatures from Greek mythology. They're old goddesses that would chase their victim with their beaks like raptors, like vultures, and their talons, and their breath. They had vulture breath, smelled like rotted meat, and they screeched, and they chase you. And I bet if you're a Warzone kid, you can relate to that. Well, I'm an addict and bulimic, and the way my furies chased me through my life is by doing stuff to my body and mind to change it, to change how I felt. Cram dope into my veins or lungs or blood. Cram food down my gullet and heave it up again. Or cram food down my gullet and not heave it up again. 378 pounds is the most I know that I ever weighed. Today I weigh 194. And that's the least I've ever weighed as an adult. And I'm extraordinarily happy about it. And when I run from the Furies, when my demons are chasing me, I run to safety. I run to Magar's stronghold. In Game of Thrones, that's where Jaime and Cersei ran to meet each other at the end of the show. It was the dark sub-basement under the Red Keep, big castle. And they went in there to find each other because they felt safe with each other. And that's where they died. Because the dragon, the Fury, chased them in there, and then he brought that Red Keep right down around their ears. I'm changing the story a little bit. In the Game of Thrones, the dragon didn't chase him in there, but you get the idea. I change it so it would be better for my purposes. That's the image I have in my mind of being an addict or bulimic or whatever you do, whatever your furies lead you to do. And you run into Magar's stronghold, which for me is like getting high or stuffing my gullet with Oreos and peanut butter and Ovaltine. Make myself feel better. That's where I go to get away from the Furies. And for me, that's Magar's stronghold. That's the place where Jaime and Cersei went to be safe, they thought, but it's really where they went to die. And I know as a Warzone kid, as an addict, if you live in your addiction as an addict, you'll die in your addiction as an addict. Jails, institutions, and death. That's what they say in 12-step in Narcotics Anonymous. It's a fellowship I went to for a long time. In Narcotics Anonymous, they'll tell you that if you don't find your way out, jails, institutions, and death is where you're liable to end. If you're an addict, you can always get high one more time, but you can't always recover one more time. That's Magar's stronghold. And I was thinking about our Jenga tower. You know, that metaphor of the Jenga tower, you hear a lot about personality. I'm very familiar with personality disorders. I got borderline personality disorder. And I'll tell you, if I could get a psychiatrist to sit still and give me the diagnostic instruments for some of the other ones, I would score very high on a few of them. Narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial. I mean, I've never done time in prison. I've never been incarcerated. But I was a full-time addict for a while, and I know what my relationship is with law and order, and, you know, fairly antisocial. I got policies around not breaking laws because I like my freedom. But I have a lot of those characteristics. And when I think about that stuff, it's just personality disorders, borderline, NPD, whatever you want. When I think about those things, it seems to me like those are just words for different shapes of Jenga towers. In your childhood, this is just Ben talking, it seems to me, I'm a human being and I'm interested in being a human being and living my life. I'm a humanist if I'm anything in the world at all. I'm a Star Trek humanist. I believe in learning and becoming who I am as a human being. It seems to me like what happens in our childhood with our psyches is our Jenga tower becomes whatever shape it has to become to get us through. And if you got borderline, that's characterized by wildly swinging emotions, a lot of impulsivity because you got those strong emotions and you got to react, you got to deal with them, a tendency to feel betrayed, a tendency to oscillate, to go back and forth between intense love and intense hate or rage or cold or icy coldness. Man, does that sound familiar to me? And anyone who's ever been close to me in my life would probably verify that. Like a lighthouse. The light is real, real bright, or it's real, real dark. The light shines in your eyes and blinds you, or it's pointed the other way and you're just in the icy cold. I suspect that's probably what it's like to attempt to try to be close to me as a human being. At least in the past. In the present, I work very hard to try to be who I am now. But I'll tell you what, I have the same psyche. I live at peace. My relations with other people are characterized by peace, not war. But I have the same psyche. I practice Zen. I sit on the cushion. And I know what my psyche is like in the present moment. And it's still very much like that. I don't live in the grip of it. Because of my Zen practice, I have a very different relationship with it. My thoughts and my impulsive thoughts, my love and hate and rage and icy coldness, those are just feelings that I do not have to live in. I do not have to be their slave. They come in and they go out. But that's still my psyche. I don't get to be someone else. I'm this guy. I don't need to be someone else. I need to be this guy, living in the here and now. But my psyche is that way because it had to be that way for me to get out of my childhood. My folks were both war zone kids. They had very damaged psyches. And they found their level of peace. They found their, whatever relief and peace they found it in born-again Christianity, and they're very devout. This image of born-again Christians as hypocrites and all that, this is a cartoon image. Of course they're hypocrites. There's hypocrites and everything. But if you think that's all it is, that's a cartoon. They gave their lives to devotion to God. And they were very serious about it. And that did not change their psyches. They were still very, very damaged people. And they wanted to live out their lives through me. And they wanted me to be the perfect version of what they thought they could or should have been. I can just tell you that. That's what it was like for me. I was there. And my psyche is the way it is because of that. Enormous psychological harm, emotional harm, sexual harm, some physical harm, but not nearly as much as other people. I was never beaten. I got spankings, but I mean, I'm a Gen Xer from Oklahoma City. Mine were very mild by comparison. That was just the way of those people, which doesn't mean it didn't cause harm. It just meant I was nothing special about that. And I know that I had to cope with what it was like to have a maternal organism who did not know kindness as a child. She herself did not really know kindness. And so she did not really know how to dispense it to me. She could do kind of obsequiousness, being real nice and honey sweet. But I knew that was a persona. And I knew that as soon as I stepped over some invisible line, I learned to see those lines. I learned to detect them. Like, you know how ants lay down invisible pheromones so they can find their way back to the ant hill? I learned where those invisible lines were. Because when I crossed them, she was emotionally, psychologically cruel and very, very hard. No give. None. Zero. And when she wasn't happy, she flung me into the outer darkness out there on the far side of Pluto. And as a child, it was very hard for me to cope with a mother like that. And I absorbed it. What it's like to suddenly go from the warm lighthouse of this obsequious, honey sweet, nice persona to the hard as nails, cold as outer space, frozen, icy Pluto when she wasn't happy. That was my entire experience of love as a child with my maternal organism. And as an adult, I reflect that, much to my nausea. And that gives, knowing and seeing as an adult that I have those qualities, gives me a real high level of motivation to sit on my cushion and to stay on the trail to the western lands, like Gandalf told the hobbits, stay on the path. And when I'm lost in the Grail woods, I look to find my own path and my own way out, and I stay on my path, and I try not to follow anyone else's path because it won't take me anywhere but in circles. And my old man was a hot off the chopper door gunner from Vietnam. He was there for 3 tours. 1, he owed Uncle Sam. 2 more, he went back and forth voluntarily. And I grew up hearing stories about the Vietnam War that are nothing at all like the stories you get from the Vietnam War in popular culture, Platoon and Apocalypse Now and all that. I grew up around Vietnam vets, and the war they described to me and their experience of it and their relationship with it and what the VC were like and what the NVA were like was nothing at all like what was represented in the popular culture. But the hippie generation won that little rhetorical war. And so whenever people now think about the Vietnam War, if they think about it at all, they think about it in those terms. Well, that's just how it is. But I grew up with a combat vet that was a combat vet in the era where they got no kind of nothing from the Army, and he wasn't from a social milieu where there was anything like therapy or nothing like that. Believe me, he found God, but he had a lot of what you call PTSD to deal with, and he had his own war zone childhood of abuse and neglect, more physical abuse, but also psychological and emotional harm. And I grew up in that shadow. Now, those forces, plus myself and my response to them, that made my Jenga tower the shape it is, or the shape it was when I hit adulthood. And the shape, my Jenga tower is just kind of, that's the shape it was because that's the shape it had to be. And that's how I myself, this guy, find the space to live as an adult with borderline personality disorder. I use those terms as clinical shorthand. I practice Zen. I do not believe that I'm, doomed to live as a slave to BPD forever, or doomed to always think of myself as an addict and bulimic. That's shorthand to tell you where I'm coming from as a human being. Where I am right now is it's a Friday morning and I'm living my life. But I live my life with a Jenga tower that came out of my childhood like that. And so I think it's a fruitful question to ponder, you yourself. What's the shape of your Jenga tower? And how and why did it get to be that shape? And what's your relationship with it now? What is your own relationship with what your psyche is like now, today? What is that relationship? Is it one of war? I've had a relationship of war with myself for decades. Like the Vietnam War went along for decades. I do not live in a state of war with myself now. I live in a state of peace with myself and my psyche and my heart and my soul as a human being. But my Magar stronghold, still the same. When I'm stressed out or forget myself or get caught up, I look down and there's a peanut butter jar in my hand. Not every time I eat peanut butter is like that, because peanut butter is delicious. It's the nectar of the gods, ambrosia. But I'm the same guy in that way. I do not have a different psyche. I feel the impulse when I'm stressed or agitated or things happen that I don't like. I feel the impulse to do something to change my mood. You can go in the store now. You can buy pot and mushrooms in the store. Well, you can also buy poison in the store. I don't buy that either. I'm an addict. I don't need to be doing pot and mushrooms. I ain't talking about you. I don't know you. Maybe those are fantastic things for you, and I'm on your side, but they're not for me. They're poison for me, because they lead me into Magar's stronghold, which is where, instead of living in the here and now with my own experience of myself, I try to do something to change myself. For me, that is Magar's stronghold, and that is poison. Because guess what? There's no way in the world that I can change who I am in the present moment. And I don't need to. Who I am in the present moment is Ben Johnson. A bear, an octopus, a Ben Johnson. That's who I am. That's the only thing I can ever be. And that's the only thing I ever want to be, Pilgrim, because Ben Jonson is on the trail to the Western Lands, place of peace and wholeness, where I learn to become what I am. And that's the trail you're on too, where you can learn to become who you are and find peace and the wholeness of you in your life. That's the only life we're ever going to have, Pilgrim. They say at the end of my Zen meetings, life and death are of supreme importance. Let us be aware that today the number of our days is reduced by one. Let us not squander life. Let me not squander this day on the trail. I can make it 1 league per hour on the trail to the Western Lands today. And the league is my favorite unit of measurement. The dictionary will say it's 3 miles, roughly. But the real definition of a league is how far you can walk in an hour. And on the trail to the Western Lands, on the path for you to learn and become who you are, to live your life in a state of peace, you can always make it 1 league per hour. Some hours that might be 5 miles. Some hours that might be 5 feet. Some hours that might be 1/2 of 1 step. But you can always make it 1 league per hour, Pilgrim. So let's get in our leagues for today. Short days here in Vermont. I think we probably got something like 9 hours till sunset. That means we can make it 9 leagues, Pilgrim. Let's walk them together. We got a lot to talk about and daylight's burning.